A room frozen in the middle of an ordinary morning. A wooden bed frame still standing. Ceramic vessels arranged on a shelf. And on the floor, the unmistakable outline of a human body, preserved not by intention, but by catastrophe. This was not what archaeologists expected to find when excavations resumed in Pompeii's unexcavated sectors. The assumption had always been that 2 centuries of digging had revealed the city's essential story. What the new excavations showed was that the story was far from complete. Pompeii sits near Naples in the Campania region of southern Italy. In 79 AD, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius buried the city, along with Herculaneum, Stabii, and numerous surrounding villas under 4 to 6 meters of volcanic ash and pumice. That burial, catastrophic for the people who lived there, became one of the most consequential preservation events in human history. For nearly 2,000 years, the city lay sealed. When systematic excavation began in the 18th century, each season of digging seemed to confirm the same broad picture. A prosperous Roman city, frozen at a single moment, offering a window into daily life under the empire. But that picture carried a hidden assumption. Archaeologists had long focused on the grand structures, the forum, the amphitheater, the large houses of the wealthy, the working rooms, the service spaces, the quarters where ordinary people slept and cooked and stored their belongings received less systematic attention. Roughly a third of the city remained unexcavated into the 21st century. What was buried in those sectors was, by definition, unknown. The constraint was not simply a matter of time or funding. Earlier excavation methods had caused significant damage to what they uncovered. Walls were exposed and left vulnerable to weather. Organic materials that had survived the eruption were destroyed by the act of digging. By the late 20th century, the prevailing approach had shifted toward conservation of what was already exposed rather than opening new ground. The unexcavated sectors were, in a sense, held in reserve, protected by the very ash that had buried them. The turning point came with a renewed commitment to excavation using modern methods. Ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive survey tools allowed archaeologists to map what lay beneath the surface before a single trowel broke ground. When excavation did proceed, it moved slowly and systematically, with every layer documented in detail. The goal was not simply to uncover structures, but to recover the full context of what was found: the position of objects, the relationship between rooms, the evidence of how spaces had actually been used. What emerged from those rooms contradicted the established image of Pompeii in specific and measurable ways. The preserved spaces revealed not the curated interiors of wealthy households, but the cramped, functional quarters of people who worked in those households. A room identified as a slave quarters contained a bed, storage vessels, and personal objects arranged in a space barely large enough to stand in. The volcanic material had hardened around the contents of the room, preserving the spatial relationships between objects with a precision that no later arrangement could replicate. The mechanism of that preservation is worth understanding precisely. When Vesuvius erupted, the initial phase deposited layers of pumice and ash that accumulated on rooftops and in open spaces. The weight of that material caused many structures to collapse. But in rooms where the roof held, the contents were sealed in place. A subsequent pyroclastic surge, a fast-moving current of hot gas and volcanic matter, killed those who had not already fled and filled the remaining spaces. Over time, the organic material of human bodies decomposed within the hardened ash, leaving voids. The technique of filling those voids with plaster developed in the 19th century, produced the casts that have become among the most recognized images of Pompeii. The newer excavations applied the same principle with greater precision, using materials that allowed for more detailed recovery of the original forms. The cost of that preservation is not abstract. Every object recovered from a sealed room represents a life interrupted. The ceramic vessels on a shelf were placed there by someone who expected to return. The bed frame in the corner was used the night before the eruption by someone who had no warning of what was coming. The new excavations made that human dimension harder to set aside. The rooms were not display spaces. They were the actual environments where people lived, and the evidence of that living, the wear on surfaces, the arrangement of objects, the traces of food and tools, was preserved in a way that no written source could replicate. There are legitimate uncertainties that the evidence cannot resolve. The interpretation of specific rooms and their functions involves inference, and specialists do not always agree. A space identified as slave quarters based on its size and contents might have served multiple purposes over the life of the household. The relationship between the physical evidence and the social structures of Roman life requires careful handling. The eruption preserved a single moment, not a continuous record, and the moment it preserved was one of abandonment and flight, not ordinary daily routine. What looks like a carefully arranged room may reflect the last actions of people trying to protect their belongings before they fled. The Villa of the Mysteries, on the outskirts of Pompeii, illustrates how interpretation can remain genuinely open. Its famous frescoes in what is catalogued as Room 5 are usually read as depicting the initiation of a bride into a Greco-Roman mystery cult. That interpretation is widely accepted, but not definitively proven. The images are among the best preserved examples of ancient Roman painting from the 1st century BC, and their quality is not in dispute. What they mean, and for whom they were painted, remains a matter of scholarly discussion. The area around Pompeii extends beyond the city itself. Herculaneum, buried under a pyroclastic flow rather than ash and pumice, preserves organic materials, wooden furniture, food, textiles that Pompeii's ash burial did not protect in the same way. The Villa Poppaea at Torre Annunziata, known also as Oplontis Villa A, represents the luxury end of the spectrum, a seaside residence of exceptional scale, with painted rooms and garden spaces that give a different picture of Roman life in the same region. A second structure at the same site, Oplontis Villa B, was discovered nearby in 1973 and represents a different type of use entirely. Together, these sites form a landscape of evidence rather than a single point of data. The area is now protected as part of Vesuvius National Park and recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That status reflects not just the historical significance of the finds, but the ongoing responsibility to preserve what remains unexcavated. The ash that buried Pompeii is still in the sectors not yet opened, doing the work it has done for nearly 2,000 years, holding in place the contents of rooms that no living person has entered since 79 AD. What the new excavations changed was not the broad outline of what happened at Pompeii. The eruption, the burial, the preservation, those facts were established long ago. What changed was the resolution of the picture. The rooms of ordinary people, the spaces that earlier excavation had passed over in favor of more spectacular finds, turned out to contain evidence that the grander structures could not provide. The daily life of the city, not its public monuments, but its private interiors, was more recoverable than the existing record had suggested. That is the consequence that matters. Pompeii was not finished yielding information. The assumption that 2 centuries of excavation had answered the essential questions was wrong, and the evidence that proved it wrong was sitting a few meters underground, waiting for methods careful enough to recover it without destroying it. The question that remains open is what the still unexcavated third of the city contains, and whether the methods now available are equal to the task of recovering it. Visual reconstructions are illustrative. Facts and interpretations are based on the sources listed in the description.